the Eastern Roman Empire paid tributes to Attila's Huns so that they would not invade their borders, which was humiliating for an empire that had conquered so many lands and had put so many enemies on their knees. On the other hand, Aetius, who remember was now a powerful man in the west, maintained a good relationship with the Huns with the intention of keeping them away from his borders. However, things would soon change. By the way, if you haven't seen the campaigns of Wallia and the rise to the Visigothic throne of Theodoric I, who will play an important role in this chapter, you can watch the video by clicking on the link shown at the top of the screen. You can subscribe to the channel and join the Hispanic Guard. But if you already are, one invite you to take a look at the Patreon page and consider financially supporting the channel by joining our Senate. One and the entire guard, thank you for it. Now let's continue with the video. Because we are going to witness a high caliber political game. Marciano, Emperor of the East, saw the Huns as a danger that at any moment would stop collecting tributes and prefer to plunder their lands. So in some way, he began to make Attila see that Gaul was a more desirable booty than Constantinople itself. In other words, he passed the buck to the Western Roman Empire. Valentinian, the third emperor of the West, and his loyal Aetius tried to convince the Huns that Gaul was not that important, that it was better for him to stay where he was. At the same time, they were having conversations with Theodoric I, king of the Visigoths, to guarantee his help if the Huns finally decided to invade the Western Empire. Obviously, Theodoric I knew that Attila's first target would be Ravenna, but if the Roman hosts fell, the Visigoths would be next, so Theodoric looked favorably on an alliance with the Roman Empire. From Carthage, the king of the Vandals and Alans, Genseric, tried to convince Attila to invade the west and thus eliminate the Visigoths, who were the Vandals' bitter enemies. Let's remember what happened between a son of Genseric and a daughter of Theodoric I. For his part, Attila had something to say. He also did not look favorably on the alliance between Visigoths and Romans, and he also intended to destroy the former. The fact is that all these political and diplomatic movements took place during the years 449 and 450 with the aim of avoiding a large-scale conflict. However, negotiations to avoid war failed, and Attila crossed the Rhine with his warriors to devastate various Gallo-Roman cities. Orleans, defended by Sangibanus Alans, decided to surrender without fighting, but it seems that not all the united forces were there, as the approach of the Visigothic army made Attila retreat without fighting, and Attila consulted his soothsayers, and they told him that one of his great enemies would die in battle. But this would not mean the enemy's defeat. We will see if this prediction comes true or not. The forces of both sides were gathering, with Ezio bringing all the possible soldiers from the empire. Until the 20th of June of the year 451 after Christ, the great clash between both sides took place. A clash that would be remembered for all eternity. The Battle of the Catalaunian fields took place. Let's analyze the armies of each side. On one hand, we have the Roman army. Roman because it was under the direct orders of the emperor, and Sidonius, a chronicler of the time, calls it a force of auxiliaries without legionaries. However, the troops that Aetius had brought from Italy were made up of the elite. They were Palatine auxiliaries and had superior training to the old legions of the Republic. The Romans positioned themselves on the left flank, supported by Frankish, Sarmatian, Burgundian, and Saxon auxiliaries. In the center, we have the Alan troops, led by King Sangiban, who remember is the one who had surrendered Orleans without fighting, so Aetius doubted that these men would hold their positions throughout the battle. His intention was for Attila to think the same and charge his own men to the center. Aetius' intention would be to perform a pincer move. We'll see if he succeeds. On the right flank, we finally have the Visigoths led by Theodoric I, accompanied by his successor, Turismund. On his part, Attila also had a very diverse army. In the center, he placed his precious Huns. He positioned the Gepids on the right flank to face the Romans, while he positioned the Ostrogoths against the Visigoths. It's curious how two peoples, Ostrogoths and Visigoths, who had invaded the empire together and had fought together under the command of Ararik, now they would face each other in battle. In total, we have about 40,000 men on the imperial side and about 50,000 on Attila's side. And ladies and gentlemen, the preliminaries of the battle began. The Visigothic troops took over a small hill which was on their flank. This would give them a slight advantage in the combat. At 2:30 in the afternoon, Attila ordered the charge of his entire army, and the Gepids Ostrogoths charged against their respective enemies. He attacked at this time with the idea that if the battle did not tilt in his favor, he could retreat under the cover of night. The Romans, led by Aetius on the left flank, maintained a defensive position at all times, facing the Gepids but without taking risks, with the intention of not losing men stupidly. The Gepids initially threw themselves like beasts, but soon they also began to fight in a more cautious way, so the casualties on that flank were few. And all because the battle would be decided in the center and on the other flank. Aetius' idea was that it would be the Visigoths and Alans who would bear the brunt of the battle, so that if they won the fight, they would be sufficiently weakened so as not to be able to rebel against the empire. The Ostrogoths struck the Visigoths with fury, and this was received in a shield wall formation. It should be noted that all the Visigoths were dismounted, so that they would not be an easy target for the Hun archers. The Visigoths were resisting onslaught after onslaught from the Ostrogoths, and they were doing very well, causing many casualties among the Ostrogoths. But it is true that Theodoric Thare's men were also losing men. The fact is that the center was holding, but the center was not. The Alan warriors were resisting the charges of the Hun riders, who were supported by their mounted archers. However, the Alans, who had started with not very high morale, were slowly retreating little by little, but every hour that passed, the center of the imperial forces was moving away from the axis of the battle. There came a point where the Huns could attack the Visigoths on the flank. And this is when Theodoric I mounted his steed and rallied his warriors to fight. He slightly pivoted his line to face the new threat, but an arrow struck him in the chest, killing him instantly. For a moment, both sides held their breath. Attila and the Ostrogoths, as well as Aetius himself, expected the Visigoths to beat a retreat, but nothing could be further from the truth. In a great display of initiative and sense of duty of Turismund, successor of Theodoric I, immediately proclaimed himself Rex of the Visigoths. He asked his new subjects to avenge his father and destroy the enemies of his people, and then the Visigoths, with renewed energy, switched from defense to offense and charged against the Ostrogoths and the Huns, disrupting their formations and penetrating their lines. Faced with this new momentum, the Ostrogoths lost their eagerness to fight and turned around, fleeing the battlefield. Observing what was happening, Aetius ordered his Palatines to charge against the Gepids, who hardly felt like fighting for a cause that seemed, at that moment, doomed to failure. The Romans fought against the barbarian front until they put them to flight, allowing him to leave the battlefield. The Visigoths did the same. He left the battlefield. The Visigoths did the same. Wait a moment, do you know in which famous battle, also key for Rome, this strategy took place? A center that retreats and flanks that advance and envelop? Leave me in the comments that I'm always reading you. And remember, you can join the channel's Discord, okay? To be able to keep up with everything that happens in the Hispanic Guard. Well, let's continue. Attila, seeing that he was about to be surrounded, ordered a retreat to his camp, which was nothing more than a circle of wagons. Nothing like the Roman marching camps that the Roman legions built years ago. By the way, if you don't know what these camps were like, you can find out by clicking on the link shown at the top of the screen. We might think that Attila was finished and that the imperial forces would surround his positions and crush him. Well, no. It's true that the imperial forces decided to surround the Huns and starve them out, but they let the hours pass, giving Aetius time to make political moves. Meanwhile, the Visigoths took advantage of the moment of peace to search for the body of their former king, Theodoric, as in the heat of battle they had not had time to recover his body. Thorismund wanted revenge and tried to engage in hand-to-hand combat with the Huns, but Aetius convinced the new Visigothic king to withdraw, alleging that his brothers might be plotting to take over the Visigothic throne while Thorismund was away from home. The Visigoths finally decided to return to Toulouse, but what Aetius really didn't want was for the Visigoths to gain too much power, so that, after Attila's fall, they could rise against Rome. After all, Aetius knew that there had to be a balance among the barbarian peoples, so that none would directly confront the empire. That's why Aetius also withdrew, allowing Attila to save his life, albeit with a greatly diminished army. The imperial forces had lost nearly 10,000 men, while Attila's troops more than 15,000. The following year, in 452 AD, from cities like Milan and Pavia, his ultimate goal was to take cities like Milan and Pavia. His ultimate goal was to take the city of Rome, but his men began to suffer the same hardships as Alaric's hosts years ago. The troops from the steppes began to starve, and, to make matters worse, the Eastern Empire sent reinforcements to help Valentinian defeat the Scourge of God. Attila gave up his attempt to take Rome and began to wander through northern Italy. He tried to enter the territory of the Visigoths, but Thorismund managed to defeat them, so the Huns had to withdraw from their borders. In the year 453 after Christ, Attila got married, which we could say is not of great importance, as he already had more wives. What happened is that at the banquet the king ate and drank in large quantities, and while he was sleeping that night, Attila, the Scourge of God, died from a nosebleed. Finally, the man who had forced both empires to work together, the man who seemed like he was going to destroy Rome, had died in his bed. Do you remember the prediction they gave to Attila? Well, it came true. A great rival died on the battlefield. This is Theodoric I, but this did not make the Visigoths disappear. In fact, the Visigoths were more powerful than ever. Thorismund, taking advantage of the situation, sacked Al, but he could not enjoy his reign for long because the same year that Attila died, the Visigothic king was executed by his brothers Theodoric and Frederick, with the former becoming the new king of the Goths. Year 453 after Christ, 23 years until the end of the Western Empire. TikTok. Here ends today's video. Thank you very much to everyone, and especially to the patrons and senators of the Hispanic Guard for supporting the channel and making this project continue. Hit like if you liked the video and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes.